Level A2, Puss in Boots. Puss in Boots. Part 1. Once upon a time, in a quiet village near a river, there lived a poor miller who worked very hard every day. He had 3 sons, and although he loved them, he did not have much to give them. When the miller grew old and finally passed away, he left his sons the only things he owned. To the oldest son, he left the mill where he had worked all his life. To the middle son, he left the strong donkey that helped carry heavy bags of grain. But to the youngest son, he left only a cat. The youngest son felt very sad and disappointed. He looked at his brothers and said, "My brothers can work and earn money. One has the mill, and the other has the donkey. But what can I do with just a cat? How will I live? How will I eat?" He felt hopeless and worried about his future. The cat, however, was no ordinary cat. He was clever, confident, and full of ideas. When he heard his young master complaining, he jumped onto the table and spoke in a calm, clear voice. "Do not worry, master," the cat said. "Give me a pair of boots and a small bag. If you do that, I will help you. You will see that I am not just any cat." The young man was surprised. He had never heard a cat talk before, but he trusted the cat because he had nothing else to lose. He used the last of his money to buy a pair of small leather boots and a simple bag. When the cat put on the boots, he looked very smart and important. He stood tall and proud, as if he were a gentleman. Puss in Boots, as he now liked to be called, went into the forest. He put some carrots and lettuce into his bag and hid behind a tree. He waited quietly and patiently. Soon a big rabbit came hopping through the grass. It smelled the vegetables and came closer. When the rabbit put its head inside the bag, the cat quickly pulled the string and caught it. "Perfect," the cat said happily. He carried the rabbit all the way to the king's castle. When he arrived, he bowed politely and said, "Your Majesty, this rabbit is a gift from my master, the Marquis of Carabas." The king was pleased. He loved receiving gifts, and he liked the sound of the name Marquis of Carabas. It sounded noble and important. The cat smiled to himself. He had invented the name on the spot, but the king believed it. The next day, Puss in Boots went hunting again. This time, he caught 2 fat partridges. He brought them to the king and said, "Another gift from the Marquis of Carabas." The king was impressed. He began to think that the Marquis must be a very rich and powerful man. The young man, however, still had no idea what the cat was planning. He simply trusted him and hoped things would get better. One morning, Puss in Boots learned that the king and his daughter, the beautiful princess, would be traveling near the river. He ran home quickly and said to his master, "Go to the river and wash yourself. Do exactly as I say. Leave the rest to me." The young man did not understand, but he trusted the cat. He went to the river and stepped into the water. Meanwhile, Puss in Boots ran ahead to prepare his plan. When the king's carriage came near the river, the cat began shouting loudly, "Help! Help! My master, the Marquis of Carabas, is drowning." The king ordered his servants to stop the carriage. They rushed to the river and pulled the young man out of the water. The king gave him clean clothes and warm blankets. The princess looked at him and smiled. She thought he was handsome and gentle, and she liked him immediately. Puss in Boots watched everything with satisfaction. His plan was working perfectly. If you like this story, please click like. It helps me a lot. And if you want more easy English stories, you can subscribe. Thank you for learning with me. Puss in Boots. Part 2. While the young man rested in the king's warm clothes, Puss in Boots continued with his clever plan. He knew that if the king believed his master was rich and important, everything would change for the better. So the cat ran ahead of the royal carriage as fast as his little boots allowed. Soon he reached a large field where farmers were working. They were cutting wheat and carrying heavy bundles. Puss in Boots stopped and said in a serious voice, "Good people, listen to me. The king is coming this way. When he asks who owns this land, you must say it belongs to the Marquis of Carabas. If you do not, the terrible ogre who lives in the castle will be angry with you." The farmers looked at each other with fear. They had heard stories about the ogre, stories about his strength and his magic. They did not want to make him angry, so they nodded quickly. "We will say it," they promised. A few minutes later, the king's carriage arrived. The king looked out the window and admired the beautiful fields. "Who owns this wonderful land?" he asked. "The Marquis of Carabas," the farmers shouted together. The king was impressed. "Your master owns all this?" he asked the young man. The young man, still confused but trusting the cat, simply smiled. The princess smiled at him too, and the young man felt his heart beat faster. Meanwhile, Puss in Boots ran ahead again. He reached another field where workers were picking vegetables. He repeated the same warning. "If the king asks who owns this land, say it belongs to the Marquis of Carabas. If you don't, the ogre will be angry." The workers agreed immediately. When the king passed by, he asked again, "Who owns this land?" "The Marquis of Carabas," the workers answered loudly. The king was amazed. "Your master must be very rich," he said. The princess looked at the young man with admiration. Puss in Boots continued running until he reached the ogre's castle. The castle was huge, with tall towers and heavy stone walls. The ogre was very big, very strong, and very proud. He also had a strange power. He could change his shape into any animal he wanted. Puss in Boots knocked on the door and bowed politely. "Good day, sir," he said. "I have heard that you can turn into any animal. Is that true?" "Of course it is true," the ogre said proudly. To prove it, he changed into a giant lion. His roar shook the room. Puss in Boots pretended to be scared and stepped back. "Incredible," the cat said. "But I heard you cannot turn into something very small. For example, a mouse. That must be too difficult for someone as great as you." The ogre became angry. "Too difficult! Watch this!" he shouted. In an instant, he changed into a tiny mouse and ran across the floor. That was exactly what Puss in Boots wanted. He jumped quickly, caught the mouse in his paws, and with one fast bite, the ogre was gone forever. Puss in Boots cleaned his whiskers and opened the castle gates just as the king's carriage arrived. He bowed and said, "Welcome to the castle of the Marquis of Carabas." The king stepped out and looked around. The castle was beautiful, with large rooms, shiny floors, and lovely gardens. "This is truly a magnificent place," he said. "Your master must be a great man." The young man, still surprised by everything, walked beside the princess. They talked and laughed together. The princess liked him more and more with every moment. Finally, the king said, "My daughter likes you, and you seem like a good and noble man. You should marry her." The young man agreed happily. He could hardly believe his luck. Thanks to Puss in Boots, he now had a castle, land, and a princess who loved him. Puss in Boots became a great lord in the castle. He lived a comfortable and happy life. He never had to hunt for mice again. Unless he wanted to, just for fun. If you like this story, please click like. It helps me a lot. And if you want more easy English stories, you can subscribe. Thank you for learning with me.